I was standing on the cracked sidewalk outside the old two-story house I grew up in, the one with the faded blue shutters and the maple tree that still leaned toward the porch like it was listening. It smelled the same. Rain on wood, a hint of lilacs from the bush Mom planted the year I turned 8. But there was a for sale sign in the yard now, its white post stabbing into the soil like a gravestone. I hadn't planned to come back, not after everything that happened. But when I got the call from a neighbor saying, "They're selling your family's house," something inside me tightened. They? I'd asked, though deep down I already knew who she meant. My brother, Daniel. The last time we spoke, it ended with slammed doors and unspoken words. He'd stayed behind after Dad passed, while I'd escaped to college in Chicago. We'd split the inheritance, or so I thought. But this house, was supposed to stay in the family. That was the only promise we'd made to Mom before she died. I walked up the front steps, each one groaning like it remembered me. Through the window, I could see moving boxes scattered across the living room floor. My heart hammered as I knocked. It was Daniel who opened the door, looking older than I remembered. Hair thinner, eyes tired, flannel sleeves rolled up like he'd been working. His expression froze when he saw me. "Maddie," he said my name like a question. "What are you doing here?" "I heard you're selling the house." My voice came out softer than I expected. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, thought it was time." Time? I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. The air smelled faintly of paint and dust, but underneath it, memories. Birthdays, Christmases, the last fight between our parents. "You can't just sell it, Daniel." "I can. It's mine." Those words stung more than I wanted to admit. "Yours? Since when?" He turned away, busying himself with a stack of papers on the counter. "Since Mom and Dad left it to me." "That's not true. They left it to both of us." Daniel sighed. "Maddie, you left. You wanted nothing to do with this place." "That's not fair." "No, what's not fair is me spending the last 15 years fixing the roof, paying the taxes, keeping the lights on, while you send Christmas cards once a year and call that family." His voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. He wasn't wrong, not entirely. After Mom died, I couldn't handle being here. The walls felt haunted, and every room smelled like grief. So I ran, thinking distance would dull the ache. But it didn't. It just made it quieter. Still, something in me rebelled. "You don't get to erase me from my own home." He slammed a folder shut. "I'm not erasing you. I'm moving on." The sound of packing tape tearing across cardboard filled the silence. I looked around. The couch was gone, Mom's china cabinet empty, the cross that used to hang over the mantel missing. My throat tightened. "Do you even remember what Mom said before she passed?" I whispered. "Promise me you'll take care of each other and this home. You promised, Daniel." He looked up, eyes wet and defiant. "I am taking care of it. Selling it is taking care of it." I wanted to scream that he was wrong, that letting it go was betrayal, but before I could, a woman's voice called from upstairs. "Honey, did you find those closing papers?" I froze. Daniel hesitated before answering. "Yeah, almost." And then she appeared, a blonde woman in her 30s, wearing a loose gray sweater and holding a mug of coffee. She smiled when she saw me. "Oh, you must be Maddie. I've heard so much about you." I blinked. "I didn't know you were married?" He cleared his throat. "This is Claire. Claire, this is my sister." Claire extended a hand. "It's nice to finally meet you." I shook it out of politeness, though I barely felt my own fingers. Married? Selling the house? And I hadn't known a thing about it. A decade of silence between us had grown roots deeper than I realized. I swallowed hard. "So this is final, then?" He hesitated. "We close on Friday." something in me broke quietly, like a picture frame slipping off a nail. I turned toward the front door, but before I reached it, eyes caught the old oak chest by the window, the one Dad built when I was 6. It wasn't packed. The brass latch still gleamed, even through the dust. "Do you still have the key?" I asked, nodding toward it. Daniel frowned. "Pretty sure it's empty. Humor me." He sighed, but dug through a drawer, pulling out the tiny gold key we used to hide in Mom's sewing kick. The click of the lock felt like unlocking a heartbeat. When I lifted the lid, a wave of old paper and cedar scent filled the air. Inside were photo albums, a few letters tied with ribbon, and tucked between them, a thin manila envelope with my name scrawled across the front in Dad's handwriting. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a document, a property deed, dated 15 years ago. I stared at it, reading and rereading. The signature at the bottom was unmistakable, Dad's. And next to it, in clear legal print, were the words, "Transfer of ownership to Madison L. Carter." My heart stopped. "Daniel," I said quietly, holding it out to him, "did you know about this?" He frowned and took the paper. His eyes scanned it once, twice, then again. That can't be right. Dad never said." "But he did," I whispered. "He already gave it to me." The room went still. The ticking of the old wall clock was suddenly deafening. Claire shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe there's some mistake?" I shook my head. "No mistake. This is notarized." Daniel looked at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. His face drained of color. "You're saying you own the house?" "I'm saying I already did." He dropped the paper onto the counter and walked away, his shoulders rigid, hands on his head like he was trying to keep his world from unraveling. I watched him disappear into the kitchen, and for a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, he came back, voice low. "Why didn't you say anything?" "I didn't know. Until now." The rain outside had started again, tapping gently against the windows. The maple tree swayed like it was listening in. "I don't want to fight, Daniel," I added, "but this changes everything." He looked at me with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Yeah, it sure does." And just like that, the home that once held our childhood laughter became a battlefield.
The silence that followed was heavy, like the air right before a thunderstorm. Claire quietly excused herself, murmuring something about calling a realtor. The sound of her footsteps faded up the stairs, leaving just me and Daniel in the house that suddenly didn't feel like either of ours. He paced the living room, running his hand through his hair. "So what now, Maddie? You gonna throw me out? My wife? My life?" I flinched. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" He turned on me, eyes sharp and wet. "You show up after years of radio silence, find one old paper, and suddenly you own everything? You didn't even know about it." "I didn't know," I admitted. "But that doesn't mean I don't care." He let out a hollow laugh. "Could have fooled me." Something inside me cracked again, not loudly, just a quiet ache in the ribs. "Daniel, I didn't leave because I stopped caring. I left because staying hurt too much. After Mom died, you know what it felt like walking these halls? Like grief had taken up every inch of air." He didn't say anything. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought I saw something soften behind his anger. I couldn't breathe here. Every creak in the floor sounded like her footsteps. Every sunrise through that kitchen window looked like her standing there, humming while she made coffee. I couldn't do it. He stopped pacing, his back to me. So, you left me to do it alone? His voice wasn't angry that time. It was tired, broken. I swallowed hard. You're right. You did it alone, and I'm sorry. I can't change that. For a while, neither of us spoke. The rain outside deepened into a steady rhythm. The smell of wet leaves drifted in through the cracked window, mixing with the faint scent of the lemon polish Mom used to use. Daniel finally turned to me, eyes rimmed red. You know what's funny? I spent years keeping this place together because I thought that's what family does. I thought if I stayed, maybe I could hold on to something of them. But the bills kept coming, the roof leaked every winter, and the taxes? Ugh, he shook his head. I was drowning, Maddie. And you? He paused, his voice trembling. You never called. The guilt hit hard and true. I know, I was selfish. No, he said quietly. You were grieving. We both were. We just did it different ways. He sank on the edge of the old armchair, the one with the worn floral fabric. I sat on the floor beside the oak chest, the open deed still lying between us, like a wound. Maybe Dad meant to tell me, he said finally. Maybe he thought it'd make things easier if you owned it. But it didn't. No, I agreed softly. It didn't. There was a long silence before he spoke again. So, what do we do now? I looked around the room, the framed family photos still on the wall, dust gathering in the corners where time had stood still. I said, we figure it out. Together. Like Mom wanted. He gave a weak smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Together, huh? That's new. I smiled faintly. Maybe it's about time. Just then, Claire came back downstairs, phone still in hand. She said, the realtor's expecting the deposit tomorrow morning, but maybe we should hold off? Daniel nodded. Yeah. Put it on pause. She looked surprised, but didn't argue. Okay. Then, after a moment, she offered me a small, kind smile. For what it's worth, I'm glad you came, Maddie. He's missed you. I looked at Daniel, who pretended not to hear. I've missed him too, I said quietly. After she left the room again, I stood and walked to the mantel, running my fingers along the empty space where the cross used to hang. Where is it? I asked. Daniel looked up. What? Mom's cross, the one that Dad made from the barnwood. He pointed toward the hallway, in the box with the keepsakes. I went and found it, still wrapped in tissue paper, a thin layer of dust settled on the edges. I held it in both hands, the smoothness of the wood familiar, comforting. I said, remember when she used to tell us this house was blessed? Yeah, he said softly. Said no matter what happened, Grace lived here. We both went quiet. The word grace hung in the air like something fragile but alive. Maybe it was time to let it live again. That night, I stayed in my old room. The wallpaper was peeling, but the smell of cedar from the closet was the same. I lay awake listening to the rain against the window and thought about everything Dad must have been thinking when he signed that deed. Maybe he meant it as a way to bring us together again someday. Maybe he knew we'd both need a reason to come home. In the morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains, soft and gold. The rain had stopped. I came downstairs to find Daniel already in the kitchen, making coffee. He handed me a mug without a word, and we sat there for a long while, sipping in silence. Finally, he said, So what happens now, legally speaking? I shrugged. Technically, the house is mine, but that's not what I want. He gave me a puzzled look. You don't? I shook my head. No, I want us to decide what happens to it. Together. Maybe we sell it, maybe we don't. But not like this. Not without peace. He stared at me for a moment, then exhaled slowly. You sound like Mom. The corners of my lips lifted. I'll take that as a compliment. He chuckled quietly. You should. We spent the rest of the morning cleaning, sorting through old boxes. Every drawer seemed to hold a ghost. Dad's fishing lures, Mom's recipe cards, my report cards, letters we'd written each other as kids. At one point, I found a Polaroid of us standing in front of the house, both missing teeth, holding up our first snowman. Daniel looked at it and laughed, really laughed, for years. He said, "Look at us. We thought we owned the world." I said, "Maybe we did. At least this little piece of it." As the sun moved across the sky, something in the house seemed to shift, like the weight of years of resentment was lifting. Little by little. But by evening, reality crept back in. Bills were still unpaid, the roof still leaked, and the truth about ownership still hung between us like a loaded question. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You know, even if you let me stay, I can't afford this place. Taxes alone are more than my mortgage was supposed to be. I know. But maybe we don't have to do it the way we've been doing it. He frowned. What do you mean? I mean, maybe this house doesn't have to be a burden. Maybe it can be a beginning. He stared at me, confused but curious. A beginning of what? I smiled a little, looking around. Of something good, something new. He tilted his head, skeptical but softening. You always did talk like that. And you always pretended you hated it. He chuckled again, shaking his head. Yeah, still do. That night, as the sun set behind the maple tree, I stood on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the light spill through the branches. The house creaked softly behind me, settling. For the first time in years, it didn't feel haunted. It felt waiting. And somewhere deep inside, I knew the story wasn't over. Not for the house, not for us. The next few days blurred into one long, strange dance between nostalgia and uncertainty. Every morning, Daniel and I would make coffee in silence, then dive into another corner of the house, sorting, cleaning, arguing, remembering. The past had a way of surfacing in dust and cardboard. On the third morning, I found Dad's toolbox in the garage, rust creeping along the edges. Inside was his old hammer, the wooden handle worn smooth from years of use. I turned it over in my hands, remembering the summer he taught us how to build the fence. Daniel had been so proud when Dad said his side looked straighter than mine. You keepin' that? Daniel asked from behind me. I looked up. Yeah, some things you just don't throw away. He nodded slowly, then picked up an old baseball glove from a shelf. Guess that goes for this, too. There was something in his eyes, a kind of quiet ache. For the first time in years, we weren't enemies. We were two grown kids standing in the wreckage of what used to be home, trying to decide what could be saved. That afternoon, Claire joined us in the living room. She'd been gentle these past few days, never pushing, always kind. She set down 3 mugs of tea and said, So, I've been thinking. Maybe the answer isn't selling or keeping. Maybe it's something in between. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Like what? She hesitated. You know how Pastor Reeves mentioned the church's outreach program last month? They've been looking for a property big enough to host families in transition, single moms, folks trying to get back on their feet. What if this house could do that? I blinked. You mean donate it? Not necessarily donate, she said quickly, but maybe lease it out to them or partner somehow. You both still keep ownership, but it becomes something that helps people. Daniel leaned back, skeptical. That's a big step, Claire. I know, she said softly, but maybe that's what this place needs, to be filled again, with life, with purpose. Her words hit something deep in me. Purpose. That's what the house had lost after Mom died, its heartbeat. Maybe it wasn't meant to just hold our memories. Maybe it was supposed to hold someone else's hope, too. Daniel rubs his chin. You think we could really make that work? I do, she said, but it would have to be both of you, together. He looked at me. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to sneak cookies with me after bedtime, not the man who'd carried too much alone. What do you think, Maddie? I took a long breath, looking around the room. The light through the window fell across the floorboards where we used to play marbles. I think maybe this is what Dad was trying to tell us. He frowned. How do you mean? Look, I said, pointing to the deed still lying on the table. He didn't give it to me instead of you, Daniel. He gave it to me because he trusted me to bring us back together when it mattered. Maybe he knew we'd both lose our way. Maybe this was his way of making sure we found it again. Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. You really think God had a hand in that? I smiled faintly. I think he always does. We're just not usually paying attention. He chuckled under his breath. You sound like Mom again. She was usually right, I said, and for once he didn't argue. That evening we called Pastor Reeves. He was thrilled about the idea and asked if he could come by the next day to talk it through. When we hung up, Daniel looked at me and said, Guess we're really doing this. I smiled. Guess we are. Later, that night, after Claire had gone to bed, Daniel and I sat on the porch again. The crickets were loud, and the air was thick with the smell of grass and summer rain. He leaned back in the old rocking chair Dad built and stared out at the yard. You know, he said quietly, I used to talk to Mom out here. After she passed, I'd just sit here, tell her everything, how the roof was leaking again, how work was slow, how I missed you. Felt stupid at first, but after a while, it helped. I looked at him, tears stinging my eyes. What did you think she'd say? He smiled faintly. That I was doing my best, that she was proud of me, that I should call you. I let out a soft laugh through the lump in my throat. Sounds like her. Yeah, he said. She would like this, you know. What we're doing, turning it into something good. I nodded. She would. The next morning, Pastor Reeves arrived, a warm man with kind eyes and a voice like calm water. He walked through the house slowly, touching the banister, the windowsills, the kitchen counters. There's something special about this place, he said. You can feel it. We told him about our idea to let the church use the house for transitional families, to turn it into a place of refuge. He nodded thoughtfully. That's a beautiful vision, but I have to warn you, it's not easy work. It'll take time, money, and commitment. Daniel and I exchanged a glance. We know, I said, but it feels right. He smiled. Then maybe that's all the confirmation you need. By the time he left, the sun was high and bright, glinting off the windows like the house was waking up again. Daniel looked at me and said, Guess this is happening. It's happening. That night, we found an old family Bible on the bookshelf. Inside was a faded photo of Mom and Dad standing right where we were, on the porch, arms around each other, smiling at something beyond the frame. On the next page, written in Mom's looping handwriting, were the words, As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Joshua 24:15. Daniel traced the verse with his finger. Think that's our answer? I nodded, my throat tight. I think it's been here the whole time. The weeks that followed were a blur of renovation plans and phone calls with the church committee. Claire organized volunteers, Daniel handled repairs, I managed paperwork. It was hard work,
Messy, exhausting, sometimes frustrating, but it was ours. For the first time in years, we were building something together. One afternoon, while repainting the living room, Daniel said, "You know what's weird? I don't feel like I'm losing the house anymore. I feel like it's being set free." I smiled, rolling paint onto the wall. Maybe that's what redemption looks like. He paused, looking at me. Redemption, huh? Yeah, I said softly. We lost our family once, but somehow this place gave us a way to find it again. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Guess Grace really did live here after all." I laughed, wiping paint from my cheek. Still does. Outside, the maple tree swayed gently in the breeze, its leaves glinting gold in the afternoon light. And for the first time since I was a child, I didn't just see a house. I saw a home, reborn, restored, redeemed. By the end of that summer, the first family moved in, a young mother named Elena and her 2 little boys. When I handed her the keys, she cried, whispering, "I didn't think people did this kind of thing anymore." I smiled through my own tears. "Neither did I said. "But I think that's changing." And as they walked up those creaking steps and opened that familiar blue door, I realized something. Maybe this house was never meant to belong to one of us. Maybe it was meant to belong to everyone who needed to find their way home.